Hello, sisters. Welcome to the IMAKHOU podcast, where we unlock our potential. One story, one step, one sister at a time. I'm Aïcha, your host. In each episode, we'll share real talk, actionable tips, and inspiring journeys to help you flourish and navigate your career, whether you're climbing the corporate ladder or building your own empire. So, grab your tea, your water, your coffee, find your tribe, and let's get ready to grow, both professionally and personally, together. Hello, sisters. Welcome to the IMAKHOU podcast. Aïcha here. Today, I have the honor, the pleasure to welcome one of my fellow Toastmasters, Anne Wood. Hello, Anne.
Hello, Aïcha.
How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Anne, for taking the time to have a conversation with us, the sisters of the IMAKHOU community. Today, we're talking about leadership au féminin. Huge topic, but we'll try to concise this one into this conversation. Before we dive into the topic, Anne, can you introduce yourself? Tell me who you are and what you do.
Okay, with pleasure. So I am a woman. I'm originally from the US, but I've been in Switzerland for 30 years now. And I've had several different careers, but my present one is a leadership coach and consultant. And I'm married, I have 4 children. And yes, I've been living in Switzerland for close to 30 years now, so also Swiss.
Wow. So, Anne, I can only assume, and you'll tell me if I'm right or wrong, that you have a wealth of experience when it comes to coaching and leadership. So today, when we see a lot more women taking on leadership roles, we know that it is crucial to define leadership for women because we cannot lead as men do. So the question I want to ask you now is, what does that mean for you, leadership au féminin?
Wow, you're starting with the big one.
Yes, and then we're going to, that's how we do. We start with the big one, and then we're going to drill down into the detail.
Okay, fine. So basically, I think, first of all, you have to separate leadership and being a woman in the sense that leadership skills and leadership ability is both male and female. And so there are 6 elements that are fundamental to being a good leader, and that's vision and how you communicate that vision, how you motivate your team, how you control the process, not over or under controlling, self-awareness,
My favorite.
and situational awareness.
Okay.
And so that part is fundamental to leadership for all of us. However, for women, there is a difference, and I think one of the main differences is in communication.
Can you elaborate on that one?
Yes, so with communication, you have to be very aware as a woman, I believe, and I've seen it too, to think of it as a continuum. I think in the early days, when women were working a lot more professionally in senior roles, they tended to try to be too aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't go over well for men or women, but for women especially. You know the expressions, bossy.
Yes.
But you can't be too submissive either. And women have a tendency to want people to like them, to try to be too nice.
It's the nurturing side in our...
Yes, which of course can be a benefit, but it can also lead to problems because research shows that if you're too nice, you're not seen as competent.
Really?
Yes. And so if, for example, women can tend to say, I'm sorry a lot for anything. And it's absolutely amazing because once you become attuned to that, you hear it so often, oh, I touched the glass, I'm sorry, or I sat here, oh, was that your seat? I'm so sorry. Everything, constantly.
It's so funny. I had the same, now that you're saying it, I literally had that experience. And this week, actually, I have a colleague who came to me. He faces an issue. I'm supposed to be the one to help him fix it, but it's something totally out of my control. So I triggered all the steps to make sure that he gets what he needs. But I kept on telling him, I am so sorry you're facing this issue. I am so sorry that you had to stop your work, and I am so sorry you're not able to continue working. And the day after, he replied to me and said, you already apologized so many times. It's all right. And I understand where you're coming from. I thought you used to do this, hindering my work, by the way, because that's the belief that some of the teams have. But now that I see how you're trying to fix my issue, I know there are things out of your control and you're just doing your best. So I feel for you as well. When he said that, I thought, why did I keep on apologizing? It was nothing I could control.
Exactly. Right. And you became very aware of that. And he was helping you become aware of that. So that's helpful. And, so the other part is, it is true if you're seen as competent, you can be seen as not nice. But I think if you think of this continuum of aggressive to submissive and stay in the middle, which is being assertive. So it's also important to be direct and communicate directly, to keep your boundaries, but to respect others. And I think that helps a lot when you're thinking about how you're dealing with your team, with your boss, with anybody that you're working with, and to think of being assertive, not too aggressive and not too submissive.
Okay. Can we stop a little bit on the boundary part? I know for a fact, I've been there. I had to work really hard on that. That women, we tend to we tend to want to take on a lot on our plate. We tend to say yes to a lot. What would you say is the best way to set those boundaries? I know there is a communication part, which is very important, but how do you manage to actually build those boundaries and make it clear to others?
Well, it depends on the circumstance, I suppose. It's probably different if it's your boss or someone like that. But even with that, I think to explain, you don't necessarily have to explain always why, and you don't have to make too many excuses. You can just say, and I've seen this problem with my husband too. You can just say, I can't. I'd like to help you, but I'm not able to. Or you can say something simple like I've already promised something else, or I have an appointment then, or whatever the request is. But it is helpful to keep boundaries in mind, but to try to do it respectfully, but without being too apologetic and without maybe explaining a whole lot of things that might make you seem like you're trying to get out of it that are actually true for you.
Mm-hmm. But how do you deal with the guilt of it? Because we're trying to set those boundaries without without needing to explain why we're saying no at this point of time, be it to our boss, to our team members, to whoever we're working with. But there is a guilt element in there. How do you handle that?
Well, you'd have to talk to your therapist about how to give up guilt. It can be rather useless, although I'm sure it keeps us on the right track sometimes. But yeah, letting it go. I think women are hard on themselves. They want to help. They want to do everything to help people, but they also want sometimes to be too perfect. And so there is that Frozen song, Let It Go, was popular for a reason.
Excellent. So can you share with us some examples of leadership of Féminin now that we've set the rules when it comes to leadership itself?
Well, we haven't finished actually with that.
Okay.
Because it's important to define.
Absolutely.
That, people think of leadership as, maybe the CEO speaking to 10,000 employees at an auditorium. And it's actually a process. And so all of us, in some ways, all day long, can be doing leadership in the sense that most leadership is done in small groups. It's done with your team. It's done at a board meeting. It's done with your sports team. It's done with your family, because you're constantly making decisions and you're constantly trying to influence people so that your decision, or the one you feel is right, is going to be taken up. So in that sense, it's helpful, I think, to think of leadership. For women, what was the question that you want to, how it would be different for women? Or
those examples of leadership of Féminin, because we set the rules of leadership, but then we have to be mindful of the fact that women and men are different?
Well, I mean, I think you can think of women that you know and respect, bosses that you know and respect, and what they've done. And often it's authenticity, it's knowing yourself, it's emotional intelligence, and using the right language, knowing the people that you're working with and how to motivate them. So kind of using, I think often women can be good. I've seen a lot more women doing courses and training and those kinds of things about self-awareness and also situational awareness. I think that's sometimes where a woman might have an advantage. If in meetings you can stay aware of the dynamics of what's going on the surface, but also what's going on under the table, and trust your intuition and go with it and speak up. I would say that's one area that women who can speak well directly and aren't afraid to jump in are often more respected, and their ideas can be taken up, although they can also be ignored and spoken over. And that can be another issue.
That's another issue. But let's stay in the best case scenario where you're aware of yourself, you're aware of the situation, and more importantly, you speak up. Why is it important to speak up?
Because, first of all, people get to know you. People project a lot onto others. So if you're quiet, they might think you're not smart. They might think you don't have the audacity to speak up. Many women are not given promotions because they've been told they're not strong enough because they'll have to handle, these type A managers. I have coached women that have told me that, and their managers who would like to promote them still say, "Oh, no, you're not ready yet." Sometimes women don't take those steps themselves, but so that can be a problem. But, I mean, it's not in the sense of leadership. Who would you follow
Okay.
as a leader, for example? Someone you trust. So someone who has built trust, who's been authentic. So, for example, going in and not saying you know everything. I've also coached women who've been put in above men that have been in companies, engineers that have been in companies for 20 years, 30 years. And the good ones don't go in and say, "Well, I want you to do this or you should do that." They learn, and they learn from people, and they respect them, and they respect their boundaries. And so you can kind of picture the ideal manager. Have you had one?
Yes,
Okay, a woman.
I was lucky to have one. It was in my early career. It was the second big company I was working for. And I remember entering the company. Well, I sort of had a mishap at the beginning of the process because the person who recommended me just disappeared. Because I was associated with that person, I was deemed to be someone not serious. Hence, just at the time I was going to receive the offer, they said, "We're not going to give you the offer." So I had to fight tooth and nail. I had to explain that you cannot associate two persons. You haven't even given me a chance. And I was given the chance. The first thing I remember clearly when we had our first conversation when I joined, she told me, "I really liked you from the get-go. I'm sorry we tried to take the shortcut, but right now all the lights are on you, but I'm willing to give you the chance and give you the space." She showed me all the ropes of the job. She made sure that I had the right mentors to show me the little tricks which would allow me to grow very quickly. But more importantly, whenever something was about to go wrong, she would defend me in front of the entire team, and we would lock ourselves in a room. And at that moment, I would be given the hardest time of my life. But she never did it in a disrespectful way. No, it always was about, "Have you seen what happened here? This is the lesson you need to learn. Do not ever do that again. I will always take your side, but do not let me down." And because she always put that level of excellence in whatever she was delivering, That's what I was always aiming for. So imagine I work in a big company, 60,000 persons worldwide, very well represented. And I'm actually part of the minority. My manager happens to be part of the minority. I'm a Black woman. She's a Black woman. Some of those stereotypes that we receive as Black women, we're supposed to be warm. We're supposed to be nice to everybody. We're supposed to be loud because we're expected to be that. Well, you enter in a room where you already, everything is already against you. So you have to make sure that when you speak up, that you are clear in your communication, you are crisp, and no one can actually come at you for that. And she was so brilliant doing that. And I know how influential she has been for my career. And thanks to her, actually, I was given the chance to work on amazing projects, and that allowed me to be kind of noticed by the upper management, and I entered one of those Ivy graduate program for those big companies. So yes,
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And that's exactly a demonstration of the respect of you give for a leader that is able to do all that. Plus, it's a brilliant illustration of, it sounds like she was both a mentor and also a sponsor. And so as a mentor will, help guide you in getting better and doing things. But a sponsor is even better when you find them. And often they have to find you because they have to trust you enough to be able to talk about you to others, to say, Aïcha should have this job, or she's perfect for that. And that is really a wonderful position to be in. So that's fantastic.
I know I was absolutely grateful. So we're talking about all of these. So we have to set up. We're talking about leadership of Féminin, what we should look into. But obviously, we started brushing a little bit. Sorry, on the challenges. What would you say are the three main challenges women face when we talk about leadership?
Only three?
Okay, please, let's start three and
All right. Well, so there's a micro level. And so we've spoken a little bit about that. The micro level is the woman herself and what she needs. She needs to have self-confidence. And so she needs to find ways to build that up, to have with a support group, a community. We can talk about that in a bit because I'm a big fan of community support communities. And also, so self-confidence and learning how to communicate well, also critical. And the third one, I guess it's time and family. And so that brings us to the macro level.
okay.
I think there are some big issues now. One of them, it's society. One of them is retention of women, because a lot of women are leaving the workforce. And it's because society is not providing enough daycare. It's not providing enough support for families. It's not just a woman's issue once you have children, right?
Yes.
And there's also a backlash against DEI now. And I'm sure you've read it in the news in the US about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I think that kind of thing has caused a lot of resentment. And so I think it's for women have to be delicate now about playing the female card. And so that's also a challenge. But I think, yeah, time is the biggest issue for women, and how you balance everything, and how you, one of the problems because of this women's group that I'm part of, BPW, Business and Professional Women, that we'll talk about in a little while, we have trouble getting younger women into the organization because you're so darn busy if you're young, establishing your relationship, having children, and working is an incredible load. And I think that is one of the biggest challenges for women.
When it comes to that, we have those conversations around flexibility at work, being able to work from home 2 days, 3 days in a week. Could it be one of the solutions? When we're talking about corporate, this is one thing. On the other side, I am also a big fan of community. I do strongly believe in the fact that if you don't have a community, you will only struggle. But is there a way a community can actually be supportive of you? What do you think about that?
Well, the first one, flexibility
Yeah.
is definitely one of the main things that have helped women, where COVID has actually been helpful. And unbelievably true, pandemic had caused a great shift that actually is shifting back now, and that makes me nervous because more and more companies are saying, no, you can't work from home, you have to come in. Some of them are wisely saying 2 or 3 days a week, but some of them are starting to push for coming in full time, and that's going to push us backwards, I think, because I think it does help a lot if you can have that flexibility. But I mean, one of the basic things is who your boss is.
Absolutely.
If you have a boss who understands you, male or female. I've seen some women that say, I didn't have children and I've made it, so I'm not giving them an excuse because they have children, for example. That's not helpful. But if you have a boss that supports you, you'll probably work twice as hard for them, right?
Well, I can tell my current boss, he is the best. He understands that I am I am an employee of the company, but I'm also a mother. I am a spouse, and that I also have my hobbies, side activities that I would like to continue covering. And I'll buy the tremendous amount of work that I have. This is not something he's absolutely rigid on. If I have to come to the office only 2 days a week, perfectly fine. As long as I deliver when he needs me to deliver. He knows that I have other stakeholders, but as long as no one comes to complain, and this is, I believe, well, I will call it a blessing, but I find it also ironic that I have to call it a blessing when it should be the norm, right? Especially when we're hearing companies complaining about the fact that they don't have enough people, that the workforce is diminishing, and we have a growing number of women out there who only ask to work, nothing more. So, moving to my next question about communities, how do you think communities can actually be supportive?
Well, I actually am a living example of that. It was life-saving for me to find. I moved here as a foreigner. Um, at the time following my husband, I was a trailing spouse for his job. And at the time, I didn't mind. I had worked quite intensely for 10 years in corporate jobs that I was willing to take a break from because I came here on a non-working permit. I was not allowed to work at the beginning. And one of my life goals was to become fluent in French. And the other was I was remarried. I had 2 children from a previous marriage, but my husband and I wanted children, and I was doing fertility treatments. So I was happy for that. But then when my children were older and I wanted to go back, I was already in my 40s, and it was a problem.
How is that a problem, you being in your 40s and wanting to go back into workforce?
Well, first of all, daycare was Middle Ages at that time. It's actually gotten better here. So it was a problem. And the second thing was ageism. And it's still here, but actually I was in my 40s. So, and there were ads in the paper. This was, how long ago it was before LinkedIn and all that said over 40 don't apply.
Wow.
Because in Switzerland, they have a problem with pensions. So the older you are, the more money they have to put into pensions. So they like younger workers who have lower salaries and they don't have to do all the social stuff for. So that was a problem. I became very depressed.
Understandably so.
And frustrated because I didn't think my professional life should be over in my 40s. And so moving to another country obviously is another problem, but something saved my life. WIN. I went to a WIN conference, Women's International Network. And it was started 20 years ago by a Norwegian woman in Rome. She's now taken it all over the world, but they had a conference in Geneva. And I saw there were 1,000 women there. I saw how a woman's journey is different. I saw VPs from Procter & Gamble that were very impressive, but they were honest. They said, my husband has a flexible job. I have 2 nannies, and this is the way we structured our families. I saw women from Africa who were starting their own businesses. Just saw a whole range, and I realized my journey isn't that different. It's just another one in a line of women in the world. And there I met the president of the Business and Professional in BPW Lausanne.
Okay.
And so BPW is an international organization started 95 years ago by an American in Geneva. And it has 30,000 women worldwide now in 100 countries. And in Switzerland, there are 36 chapters, each one the language of the region because of, the French, German, and Italian. And then about a little over 10 years ago, they asked me to help start the first English-speaking chapter that meets between Lausanne and Geneva. And so I found there my tribe, my community, because it's funny, my daughters, when they were growing up, said, "Oh, Mom, you're a feminist. Dad has problems too." And I'd always answer, "I know he does, but they're different." And this is where I find an incredible support because we have monthly meetings, women from all different professions, entrepreneurs, lawyers, doctors, Indian chiefs, whatever. And we have some kind of personal development, either a speaker or a workshop, and then have dinner together and talk about that and help each other and sometimes help each other find jobs, but at least to find that women have ways that they can give ideas and help and feel supported and not alone.
Okay. Do you think an organization like BPW could influence the current policy within Switzerland when it comes to, for example, daycare? Or for another example, we're not even talking about DEI, but just recommendations to make to companies when it comes to their hiring processes so that young ladies are feeling a little bit more welcome when it comes to the hiring process. The reason I'm asking you this is because I might need to hire someone at some point, but at this point, sorry, we're hiring in my team. I'm the only woman in my team. And if you add up on top of that the fact that I'm the only Black woman, I stand out. I have an amazing team. Don't get me wrong. They're absolutely lovely. Everyone is willing to help whenever I raise my hand. I'm always given room when it comes to talking about my area of expertise. People come to me when they have specific questions pertaining to my area. But then when we start the recruiting process, there's no women. I literally see no women. And I have been complaining a lot about it lately. So I'm wondering, can a community like BPW or any other community, I'm thinking about other communities that I know of in Switzerland, can we influence the policies somehow? And if yes, how do we do that?
Absolutely. So one of the mission statements of BPW is to lobby for women. They have consultative status at the United Nations, for example. And they also, BPW Switzerland is very active politically. They don't take political sides, but they're active in promoting the issues that are important for women. And so they've been very involved with that. Many Swiss politicians, women, are in the organization, and they actually take an active role in trying to promote that. And also, I mean, there's a lot of work done now at the University of Lausanne, at EPFL, at the engineering schools, and BPW participates in that. Our club does too, of holding, talking to young girls, getting them into the math and sciences. There was just at the International School of Lausanne, there was a big day called Potential, I think, where they had women role models come in and speak to the students from the different professions. And I actually had a job for 2 years at State University of New York to promote engineering to women.
Yeah, we're lacking them. I'm in tech, so I know what you're talking about.
Yes. It's growing. There are more women in it from what I've seen, but it is difficult. And it's also, it's a challenging societal problem as well. Actually, what I found in my own informal research was a lot of women, if they have parents that are technical, then they become interested. For example, a lot of people don't know what an engineer does, and so once you they learn more about it and learn the different things. You can work in civil engineering, you can work mechanical, electrical. They become more interested. So there's a big push for that. Also, our club, BPW Lake Geneva, is giving not a scholarship, but what would you call it? Funding for a woman sports coach in the area, who's coaching young girls. She works at UEFA, the soccer federation there, and she's actually going to be speaking at our club in April. They promote girls in sports teams so that girls learn to be out there and learn how to compete and things like that. But your problem about getting more girls interested in math and sciences is there's a lot of support or projects to do that, but it is still challenging. I do have a story though about Christine Lagarde, who was president, the head of the IMF, and she used to she'd go in and talk to CEOs who'd say to her, "Oh, Madame Lagarde, we would love to hire more engineers, but there just aren't enough." And so she started carrying around their CVs with her and giving them to these guys and saying, "Oh, really? I happen to know a few." So, I don't know if that helps you at your level, but in what you're doing, but it's a challenge.
I had to be honest with my manager when we had that conversation. I was complaining about, because he told me, "Oh, you're going to have a new colleague, and that person is going to help you do this and this and that." And I replied, "Is it a she or a he?" He looked at me. I could see he was sorry, and he said, "Unfortunately, I had no female among the candidates." And I had to be honest, and I said, I cannot blame you for not trying, because I know you are an advocate when it comes to that topic. But we also need them to apply. When we're putting jobs out there, I mean, I'm looking at my network. This is the first place where I go and ask, would anybody be interested? No one is. Either because it's not they don't have the skills, plain and simple, or some of them have been in the industry, but they have been traumatized, literally, and they're just thinking about changing industry. Some of them have the resilience to continue to push through because this is their passion and they know this is what they're supposed to be doing. It's their calling. But it takes so much out of them. And one of the girls I remember, one of the friends, she's not a friend, she's more of an acquaintance. She joined the same graduate program I did as an engineer. I did it as a salesperson. She did as an engineer. Very intense, very tough one. And if you're able to get out of it, you're part of the good ones. Not only because of your skills, but also because you put in the work and you also had the grit and the resilience to go through it. 6 months on the job, I see her in front of the server room and she's crying. What is going on? I don't know what to do. This is too much. I'm going to quit. I can't continue like this. I'm being talked down. I'm being I doubt myself. Whenever I want to speak in a meeting, I'm being looked at as if I didn't know what I was talking about. What's the point? And I had to sit her down and remind her of all the achievements, all the work she had put in, and especially also the money her parents had put into a private school, engineering private school, for her to get there.
Yes, but I think you have to look at, though, the management. And so I know I've done a lot of work for INSEAD, and they do a lot of leadership training for women. And they, for example, worked for a French company where the CEO was extremely supportive of women, gave a lot of support, put them through leadership training, and also made sure that their HR departments were instructed in certain ways of how to look for more qualified women, how to treat the applications, not in an unfair way, but in a fair way. And so I think it takes a big effort. And I coached small groups within that company of women, and they were amazing and they were supported. Were they all extremely happy? No, it depends on their boss. And you can't change, especially an old timer sometimes, you can't change their attitude. If they have daughters, they're usually more open.
So we just stop at the training part. There's a trend where a woman who wants to take on a leadership role, managerial role, she's told that she needs to be mentored. So let me put it bluntly. I don't believe in mentoring a woman for a leadership position, because we know that a woman has to prove herself twice or thrice as much as a man. She is not going to be looked up for a promotion based on her achievement. While a man, his achievements, they're speaking for himself, and he's being given a promotion. But we're talking about, oh, let's mentor you to prepare you for the position. While a man is not going to be mentored, he's going to be on the position and trained on the position. I guess what I'm trying to carve out here is, how do we make that shift happen? Mentorship for women, training for men. When it comes to that.
I think both should have mentoring and training. I'm not sure that men don't have mentors. If it's an attitude of the woman isn't ready yet from a manager, that's the manager's problem. So I encourage women to go out and push their HR departments to get more leadership training, but and to do things like join Toastmasters to build their speaking and their self-confidence if that's one of the issues. And, and to push back, but in a respectful way. So, I mean, the problem is it coming from the top or is it coming from the bottom? I also had a professor once tell me, oh, there shouldn't be separate leadership training for women. And I don't agree with that. I think women can do both co-ed, and I have worked in co-ed groups because, of course, they're working in a man's world and they need to learn how to operate there. But they also can support each other in a way in the same thing I said about BBW, in a supportive way, and have that as well. So mentor, sponsor is fine. But if the manager is using it as an excuse to not promote the woman, that's a different issue. She'd have to work with her manager's attitude.
Okay. How do we educate managers?
Well, interestingly enough, in these programs at INSEAD, they make the managers watch 4 videos so that they know what the program is like, the leadership training for women, because a lot of them have a bad attitude towards it. And they encourage both the woman and the manager to have conversations about it, and then encourage the women afterwards to go in and say, okay, I've done this. Now where am I going? What am I doing? How do I move forward in my role? So it's kind of a juggling act between the manager and the employee, but and often women are given extra work too, like being the spokeswoman, and that's supposed to be on top of their job.
Hang on.
Yeah. And so that is an extra time burden or I've had, when I was president of the BPW chapter and we'd go into companies, they'd say, the HR department would say, we've been tasked to do more, DEI and women's programs, and can you put it together for us? And we're a volunteer organization, so of course we couldn't. But these poor women were struggling because they wanted to do this, but it's on top of everything else they're doing, right?
But how come with the wealth of resources we have today, you hear about leadership program here, leadership program there, train your employees to be the best leaders. Do you want to be the best leader? Take on this course. How come we're still struggling and having these kind of conversations?
Well, you can just look at politics today because the people that are interested in power are not always interested in the people working for them, right?
But
So
that's where it's very contradictory, because I mean, they're in power, they have their own agenda, fine, but they don't understand the fact that if we, the commoners, are not there anymore, there's no power for them anymore.
true.
See,
Actually, there was an American politician who said that you can be the best leader you want, but if you don't have a follower, then you're just someone out for a walk. Word.
absolutely.
A leader needs followers. But yes, but people put in those positions are not always great leaders, and that's unfortunate. But
Okay. Now let's shift a little bit there. So we have politics, but then we also have us commoners doing our thing. How can we take a better control over it? We will never have 100% control, obviously, but how can we? What are the specific actionable things that we can implement to actually enhance our positions, our leadership when it comes to the spaces we're in? So we've discussed about being good at communicating, having the vision, making sure that we communicate that vision, speaking up, setting boundaries. That one is very important, building a community. But these are, I think to some extent we all do that. I'm a woman of action. I like to see things being set up. For example, if I take my case, I want to have another kid. But my husband and I were extremely worried about daycare, for example. And given how much how we share the responsibilities, it's really 50, not 50-50. Some days I'm an 80, he's a 20. Some others we're 50-50, and some others he's the 80, I'm the 20. But we're really wondering how this is going to fly for us. Because if we compare with our life in Germany, when we found the kindergarten, it was from 8:30 till 6 p.m. and we knew we had the day to deal with work, with our other activities, and then from 6 p.m. during the weekend.
Right. In Switzerland, it's going slower. I would say get active with your politics, get active with BPW, that is pushing for better daycare. I've seen improvement since I've moved here. There are female politicians that have lobbied and pushed for more daycare, for more support for the family, not just for the woman, right?
Affordable. Is it affordable?
Affordable?
That's another.
I know, and that's an issue. But I mean, it's a slow process, and it's a difficult, complicated process, and it's happening slowly. But more and more women are needed in the workforce, and
Absolutely.
hopefully it will get better.
Now, I want to ask you about because when we talk about leadership, we talk about self-awareness, we talk about your communication style. What would you say are the number one mistakes? So I look at my sisters in my community, and we go in. Most of us, we're eager to put in the work. We're eager to show what we're capable of. But most of the time, we face walls. What would you say is the first mistake that we have to make sure that we don't make when we're stepping into those walls?
Well, one of my favorite lines is from Mary Barra, who was the first woman head of a major automotive company, General Motors, in the U.S. And she said, "Don't cut off the branches of your tree too soon, dear women, because women tend to stop a lot with their careers. My daughters are in their 30s. One of them just had a baby. And so there's this, because there is so much wrestling with, like the women that you've experienced with trying to have a family and trying to work. Sometimes women won't take the promotions, for example, and try to gut it out. There was another woman I know who was a professor who had kids and then was going to stop her PhD, and her husband was supportive to help her gut it through because he knew she would regret it. So that's one thing. Otherwise, once you get into the workforce, you have to understand what the trade-offs are, and you have to try to, men and women are trying to find things that both bring them passion and bring them income, and it's very hard to juggle. And so, and now if the couples both partners work, then it's also very hard.
In this economy, and it is necessary.
It's necessary now, and it can be that because the economy has gotten so bad that there is this push for both of the couples to work, whether they want to or not. And so it is a juggling act. So I don't know, does that help? Is there more to that?
It does. It's really making sure that we're not abandoning the vision. If I have to sum it up, because I know you just mentioned the PhD. I know of a lady who wanted to have her PhD, and in her industry, she's one of those very, very rare females. She's in construction. You can imagine how little the number of women is in there. But she wanted to pursue her PhD, and at a certain point, I remember vividly, we were having a group conversation, and she was telling us how she was thinking about giving up. So for about a week or so, Every day we would drop a message in the WhatsApp group and remind her, you're doing this because you wanted to and you're good at it. You should not give up. And it was advised, just little encouragement phrase sentences like, just go with 10 sentences today. Oh, today if you did it 10 sentences, can you try an entire page? Did you try an entire page? Good girl. We're rooting for you. That's where the community is very important as well. So first, I guess what we're trying to say is the one and only mistake that no one of us should make is to cut the branch of the tree. Just continue growing, making sure that they're pursuing whatever makes them fulfilled.
And ideally, a lot depends on your spouse and how you work together. There's a good book on that, Couples That Work, by an INSEAD professor that it actually is true, because you have to do trade-offs and you have to make contracts with each other about, first you do the PhD and then but, I know for men too that might hate their job, and then one of the women has to keep her job so that he can become an entrepreneur. So there's that trade-off. And, so it is important in who your spouse is, but you can't say to someone, well, pick a better spouse
Well,
afterwards.
once the choice is made, the only thing is to make sure that you're making it work. And
Exactly.
the community can help. Therapy can help. It's nothing. It doesn't need to go south before
That's right.
seeking therapy.
Coaching. I'm coaching someone now, actually happens to be a man who also wants to make changes and has to work with his wife who works to get an arrangement so that, you have to make money for a living too.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's an issue.
So if I take my case, we did a trade-off, my husband and I, about 7-8 years ago. He just couldn't do corporate anymore. Well, he was actually not being given room to grow as he wanted to. So we did a trade-off. He quit his job. I continued working. But then life happens. I got pregnant, laid off all at the same time, and I found myself jobless. So I decided to go with maternity leave. Then after that, I needed to find a job again, went through maternity penalty. We moved to Switzerland. He got sick, and I had to be the sole breadwinner. So it's also very important. This is bringing back to self-awareness and the whole making sure that you know who you are and how you're building your resilience. And that's a beautiful segue, because I know this is something that we hear a lot about, resilience. How do you build resilience? I have my answers, but I would like to hear yours.
Well, you build it. I had to build mine too. How did I get out of my depression when I was depressed? You have to somehow start looking for support, I think, in the way that the WIN conference did for me. And also just get out there. So you can't build your self-confidence or your leadership skills, for that matter, without being in the arena.
Yeah.
So you have to be in the arena.
Yes.
You can also read, do therapy, do coaching, to try to find ways. And, I did eventually work it out. I had to retrain in behavioral skills, and eventually was able to find work. And, now as a woman of a certain age, as they say in French, I look back and I'm happy with how I pushed through. But when I was in bed with the covers over my head, I didn't think I would be able to. But I had to trust my gut. And that's something that I think women can often be very good at. They know in their gut what the right choice is.
Absolutely.
And different people were telling me different things, and I knew they weren't right for me. And so I kept pushing. Wasn't always easy. Wasn't easy for my husband. My daughters sometimes looked at me, and I felt bad talking about guilt, because, you don't want your daughters to see you depressed because you aren't doing something out of the house that's rewarding for you. Because of course I loved them, and it wasn't that I resented being a mother. I loved being a mother too. And so it's I think that's how the only way you can do it is just to keep plugging and to try to find solutions.
So when it comes to trusting your gut, But then hearing everybody giving you an opinion, I do believe that this is one of the things we struggle the most with, because we sit there and we're thinking, I will never be able to make it again. And we seek validation. We seek other people's opinion when our gut is telling us that opinion is actually it's not going to work for you. So I love how you're putting this, saying we are good at listening to our gut feeling. We just need to make the shift and trust it much more, rather than sitting there and listening to other people. That's where I remember I was listening to a podcast this week, and it's the guest was explaining, she literally said, stop listening to other people. Number one, trust your gut. This is exactly what we're saying. But number two, start telling everything about yourself. Shut the fuck up. She literally said that. And I found that very interesting, because I know for a fact that we tend to want to have I'm going through this. How can I do? It's good to share what you're going through so that you can get the tips, but remember that you are the only one who knows what's best for yourself.
Right. And it's also helpful to emphasize to not fall into the victim role. And I think when you feel trapped or unhappy, it's easy to do that. I certainly have. And it's not helpful. It's understandable, and to work on pushing yourself out. And this is where support can help, things like a women's group, or the BPW actually offers success teams of small groups of women. A lot, it sounds like what you might be doing with your community, where they get together and they, for maybe 6 months or a year, and they actually make an action plan. And then they support each other on that action plan, and they try to make it a reasonable one, or at least take first steps in a bigger plan. But
yes, I know that sometimes so for some people, setting the big plans is what motivates them, but for others it can be daunting. So one of the things that when I have the conversations with some of the sisters, because for now I tend to have one-to-ones because they're a little bit shy. So my first question is, what is the next step? Instead of thinking about, I want to achieve this massive goal, it's really, what is the next step, and what are the actions that you're taking towards that next step? And when exactly, when is also important, because when you just say, the next step is this one, without a timeline, well, it stays just a potential action. So, but again, let's stay a little bit with the community part. What I love about community is the fact that it gives, one, you realize that you're not alone, because we tend to isolate ourselves when we are in a difficult spot. But two, it's the possibility to, when you're sharing, is to be given different perspectives. And what I wanted to ask you is, we just to dive a little bit in BPW and just share, how does that work? How can we join? What are the kind of profiles that we can expect to meet?
Well, you can join by just finding out where you live and go on bpw.ch, and it'll show you that's the Swiss website. It'll show you where there are clubs. Like, for example, there's one in Lausanne, there's one in Geneva, and we meet in Morges, the English-speaking one. So it depends on the language you want to. And then get involved, and you can actually go on different levels. I'm actually working with BPW Europe now on leadership training for women. There's even an international level. It depends on where you want to go. And actually, being in a volunteer organization and being on the board or the committee is a very helpful way to build your leadership skills. Circling back to the leadership skills, because you can practice in a safe environment.
Yeah.
It can be very challenging because people aren't getting paid, and so you have to figure out different personalities
And as well,
how to motivate them, and yeah, so that's another way to build your skills. But
we're actually over the 1 hour mark time. This was an extremely interesting topic to dive into, and I'm pretty sure we just scratched the surface.
Absolutely, there were a lot of different topics here.
What advice would you give to the sisters of the IMAKHOU community when it comes to leadership? As in, they're looking at it, they don't think that they can be leaders. What advice would you give them?
Just think about how much you are a leader already when you're working in small groups. And I'm very much believe in experiential learning, so practice. If you feel you're really so submissive that in your family runs over you, practice in a safer environment. But yeah, with your friends groups, with your sports teams, just practice, get out there, do training, read books. I mean, it can be a lot, but it can be helpful and supportive, and that's how you develop.
Okay. So for the ones who are more on the practical side, like me, I know I like to practice directly. That's why I really enjoyed my time being part of the Toastmasters, our club committee
And president.
and president as well. And now, with obviously with this project and the network as well, others prefer reading. But what I'm taking away from this is really action.
Definitely. You cannot become a leader by reading the 7 effective steps to leadership. Leadership is a combat sport. You have to get out there in the arena and do it slowly if you're really shy. I mean, we actually have 2 levels in BPW. There's a personal empowerment program for younger or women that teaches skills like negotiation, speaking skills, and those kinds of things that you need more in the beginning of your career when you're getting skills, right? But the advanced leadership is more for once you have a team. But remember, leadership is a process, and you're doing it all the time in small groups, all day long. So once you become aware of that, even in play yards with little kids,
You see the
you see those dynamics. And if you can learn about group dynamics, that's very helpful and very interesting, because every group is different and the dynamics changes how you behave. So
Wonderful. Well, we've extended a little bit, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with the IMAKHOU community. Sisters, we hope you enjoyed this episode. More importantly, that you learned a ton. Make sure to drop your comments and to let us know what you thought about it. And thank you so much again.
thank you, Aïcha. My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the IMAKHOU podcast. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. Join the IMAKHOU movement and connect with us on our website, imakhou.com, and our social platforms. We look forward to seeing you again next time. And remember, rise together, shine brighter.